All right, Tivoli, what do you say? Shall we get started? All right, so thank you all for being here tonight again. If you, we'd love to get everyone who's here to sign the sign-in sheet so we have a good record. I have a flurry of unrelated announcements. I'm using snow language today for that big psych out. Thanks for making it to the meeting despite the storm. Dan took my joke earlier. I want to thank Panda for being here tonight and filming this, and for filming so many of the important things that go on around here, including the recent loop bus situation. Panda was there, and that was great. There's been some questions about garbage collection this week. We're going to stick to what we said. We're going to have a 48-hour garbage and recycling window this week, so enjoy it. We picked things up today. We will tomorrow, and we will honor my email about Thursday. Other announcements, because someone asked this week, yard sale day will be, when it always is, on the 4th Saturday in July, and this year that's the 27th, so mark your calendars. Also, we have a couple people here from the Town of Red Hook Housing Committee, and I want to invite Adrian, who's a new Tivoli resident, to make a little announcement on behalf of the Housing Committee and their survey. Please go ahead.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I'm one of currently 5 volunteer members of the Red Hook Housing Committee, and there's a community survey that you could fill out. It's there's a QR code on a little flyer downstairs when you first walk in the building, and it's also on the Red Hook website, town website. So obviously we are super keen to have as much community feedback as possible. And we have to present some thoughts to the Red Hook Town Board in April. So although the survey will be available past that date, if anyone's thinking about filling it out before then would be fantastic. Thanks, Jill.
Has anyone in the room taken the survey already? Went out on the Village Email blast. Great.
Thank you for that,
right.
too.
Sure thing. Another announcement that I'm going to do tonight, because we have work Tivoli that we sometimes have at our meetings. For years, the Village of Tivoli has contracted for legal services with the firm Rodenhouse & Shaw. And I'm sure many of you will remember Christine Shaw, who sat with us for untold hours over untold years here. Chris has relocated to the Midwest, but she's still working with the Village and her other clients out here remotely. So we're still benefiting from her knowledge and her integrity. But her successor, as far as our boots on the ground, I want to introduce Cassandra Britton, who's here tonight. She's the new face that you'll be seeing around in the months and, dare I say, years to come. We'll see how it goes. But we've been working together for a couple of weeks, and it's been great. And I know, and you know, the high standards that Christine has for everything that she's associated with, so we have big expectations for you. Okay, folks, so I think we know why we're here, but just a little backstory. We've put forward some legislation. Legislation is unpassed law that's going to address actually 3 things: short-term rentals, accessory dwelling units, and the last page has to do with some Americans with Disabilities Act stuff that I've been working on and Tivoli's been getting recognized for around the county. It's already required in lots of instances. I mean, it's been the law since 1990, but we wanted to also, since we're passing the law, put this little caboose on it that is last but certainly not least, that says our planning board will always, during any application, stop and make sure that they did what they're already supposed to do, which is to review applications against the Americans with Disabilities Act, and also our building department will review that. So I don't think that's going to be very controversial tonight, but I did want to recognize that is in the law. This goes back, Tivoli's been thinking about short-term rentals for, I think it's 5 to 6 years. Dan, you'll know, I mean, I think that ZRC was talking in 2018, 19?
Yeah.
Certainly before the pandemic. Like almost everything, those conversations and our ability to have a community conversation were impacted so severely by the pandemic, so things got slowed down a little bit. We picked it back up in 2022, and I think a lot of you were at a meeting we had on November 1st, so that's 14 months ago or so, on short-term rentals. Who was at that meeting? Good, great. Glad you all came back. But we also realized and thought, you know, the accessory dwelling unit concept is very important as well. And there's a lot of interface and overlap and synergy and whatnot. So it really made more sense to try and do them together. So we took another 14 months to bring on ADUs. I want to thank the village board for working very hard. We've got some long evenings, hello Peter, and some healthy discussions, vigorous, passionate, healthy discussions about what might be best. So we've sort of taken our first stab at this, a first stab built on 5 years of effort. But what we're going to share tonight is a draft. And the reason we want to have this meeting, and we always try and do this here in Tivoli, you know, we're 5 brains, you're a lot more, so let's see what we can do. And you know, on some of these more complicated issues, there's quite a spectrum of opinion, and so we do have to make some compromises and come up with maybe some sausage in the law, but we're going to try. So I'm just going to get started with some of the points in what I call the cliff notes, because it is a 14-page law, and that can be a lot to chew on for some folks. So definitions are really important. For the purposes of our conversation, we'll try and use these definitions and stick to them as defined. We're going to argue about the definitions, but we'll see. An STR is a short-term rental. And if you're going to say something like Airbnb, it's more useful to say STR for us because there are a number of platforms that are used. So STR covers Vrbo and Airbnb and whatnot. And an STR we're proposing is renting a room in a single-family home for less than 30 days. So anything over 30 days becomes long-term renting in New York State law. There's already landlord-tenant law that governs all that stuff, so we're only talking about stays of less than 30 days. Accessory dwelling unit, the ADU, a dwelling unit subordinate to a one-family dwelling on a residential parcel with its own kitchen, bath, living, and sleeping facilities and its own entrance. ADUs may be created through conversion of some interior portion of the existing dwelling. You have a really big house, you're going to carve out one floor, put a door in the back, and it becomes its own, another kitchen, another bath. It's in the same shell of the original building, but it's a completely separate dwelling with its own facilities. Adaptive reuse of an accessory structure like a barn or garage, or entirely new construction. And for now, we are keeping this definition bed and breakfast. Our friends over the town of Red Hook, when they did their law a couple of years ago, they ended up just getting rid of bed and breakfast because it is similar to an ADU, and sometimes, so we'll see. We found some value in keeping that to illuminate some of the distinctions that we think might be useful for us, but we'll see. So for now, bed and breakfast, renting of 1 to 4 rooms for short-term occupancy. And starting place, and I'm sure, I hope everyone has read these. STRs will be permitted in all districts. I forgot, would one of you go down to the zoning office and grab the zoning map, please? Yeah. Only when hosted by an owner or designated agent who stays on the property with the guests, and it would be allowed in all zoning districts except the LC, which is right down on the riverfront, but does not include that little piece of the R15, and the map is coming, sorry I forgot it. That is basically all of the residences on Friendship Street. Yes?
Just a clarification on STR, the definition that you started with. So you say it's specifically a single family home.
Yes.
If you have like a duplex as a building, then it's not covered.
I'd like to get through everything, because
Right.
that's exactly the sort of
That's the point I
discussion we're
wanted
gonna
to
have,
make, yeah.
but yeah. We'll definitely get a chance to bring that up. And again, we're trying to have a starting place so we can travel somewhere. Only in single family homes. Only 1 bedroom per property may be rented out. Only up to 40 nights a year. STRs would require the owner to seek an annual operating permit from the village building department and pay an annual fee. We have on the back a sample of a permit. We'll call it the license. Thank you. There's an easel in there. Thank you. So the data that would be captured on the license is in the body of the law, which you probably read, but it's, you know, who are you, where are you, what's the address, what's the tax ID, do you have any home occupations currently? Because under the village home occupation law, you may have a barber shop or a business or something. Class 1 occupations would be all right. Class 2 occupations, like a landscaping company, you would not also be allowed to have an STR in the same property. Thanks, Peter. There would be a floor plan and showing the egress and the exits, which room is being rented, and you would also sign off and say, yes, we have all the required safety accoutrements like smoke detectors, radon, etc. So that would be on the applicant for the application would say, yes, sign that thing, and then if there were ever a problem, we say, you said there were smoke detectors. So we should kick around at some point in our conversation tonight what that annual fee would be. A lot of other communities do something like the average one-night stay in an STR or the average two-night stay in an STR. So that could be, if it's 200, then 200 or 400 or 250 or 250, 500. But, you know, I put in here to be discussed because it's to be discussed. The annual operating permit would be specific to the owner and not transferable. So if you got it and you sold your house, it doesn't mean they automatically get it. Or if you moved across town, doesn't mean that your new location has the same license. You would have to come in and do it again. Any parcel owner with one STR permit cannot obtain a second permit in the village. A number of STRs will be capped. Again, there's some breadth of opinion on the board. We're interested to hear from you. Maybe 10, maybe 20, maybe 1,000, I don't know. Subject to an annual lottery. So this is a big mechanism where some communities have used a lottery. So you got your license, doesn't mean you're going to get it next year. Now some of that would depend on how much demand there is and how much we set the cap at, right? So I know the Village of Rhinebeck has a lottery on their unhosted STRs, and it's 15 a year. So if they get 15 applications and then there's a 16th, then oop, now we're starting the lottery. Apparently they have not had that many yet. And STRs are for transient residential occupancy. Events such as gatherings, parties, weddings, meetings, banquets would be prohibited. And no recreational vehicle, trailer, tent, and our favorite treehouse or other temporary housing may be used as an STR. On accessory dwelling units, the ADUs would be permitted on single-family lots in the R15,000, R1A, R2A, R3A, and RB districts. So if you're not familiar with the village zoning map, that's basically everything we said. The green, that's the LC, it wouldn't be allowed down there. General business is pink, residential business up on 9G, Ralph's Garages, the brown. The ADU, unlike an STR, where you just go to the building department and say, hey, I want to rent out my room, I meet all the stuff, here's my fee, give me my license. An ADU, you would have to go to the village planning board. So that's a whole other process. You would get a special permit, and that is so that the planning board could have a greater degree of review over that, because what we're proposing may have a heavier impact if you've got multiple people, multiple vehicles, they need to check the parking and whatnot. So that's a difference, but, okay, sorry, skipping ahead. The ADUs would have to comply with all the existing setbacks for that district. So right now, you can't build your house right on the neighbor's property line, it has to be set back. And those setbacks vary depending on what zoning district you're in. Those are all in the village code, which you can find. Google Tivoli Village Code, type in zoning, and it'll show you the schedule of bulk regs, setbacks, etc. One ADU could be permitted per lot, and we're proposing to allow a maximum of 2 bedrooms in an accessory dwelling unit. And lastly, we come to bed and breakfasts. These would be permitted. So currently, historically, Tivoli's had the bed and breakfast definition, and it's been permitted in every zoning district in the village. And it's been defined as owner occupied. So for example, at this time we have 2 that are still operating, which is the Saminsky-Insky, which is in the R15,000, and the barn, which is over here in the R2A, just past the bridge. So we're proposing to say that that is no longer the case, and it could only be in the general business and the residential business districts. So that would be a big change. We would grandfather existing correctly operating bed and breakfasts, and I've reached out to those operators to make sure that they knew that it was coming so that they can follow along and give us their take. We were going to propose 2 levels of bed and breakfast. So a 3 and 4 bedroom bed and breakfast, which would be a single family home. You have to have a live-in, either the owner or the registered agent would have to be there whenever the guests are there. So if the guests are sleeping there, the owner or the agent is sleeping there. It's posted. A 1 or 2 bedroom B&B in the GB or the RB could be unhosted, but they need to have a local registered agent, similar to our current landlord-agent law, where that person has to be within, I think it's 15 miles of the village, so that if there's a problem, we can get someone on the phone and say, that mattress is in the road, get that out of there, right? And the bed and breakfast, and this would be a big difference in why a bed and breakfast under these definitions would be different than an STR, is they could operate an unlimited number of nights a year. So with that starting place, trustees, is there anything you'd like to say before we just open it up? We got plenty of time, there's no snow, we're happy to be here for a long time. And again, thank you all for being here and caring about what we're up to. It really helps us a lot.
Does it make sense to go through the intent before we get started?
Sure. You want to do that?
We can give you some space. Yeah, thanks. Do this first. All right. So the intent of the law, the purpose of this law is to amend the Village Tivoli Code in order to regulate short-term rentals and authorize accessory dwelling units in a manner that will support affordable housing. The law establishes new regulations regarding permits for short-term rentals and amends the Village of Tivoli zoning law in order to adequately regulate short-term rental uses. The law also amends the Tivoli zoning code to authorize accessory dwelling units under circumstances where such use is compatible with existing uses of neighborhood character. The use of short-term rentals as an alternative to traditional lodging has increased in the nation and in the region in recent years, and many tourists now seek accommodations in short-term rentals via various website platforms. Short-term rentals can offer an alternative means of income for some property owners, but they also have the potential to adversely impact community character by allowing what are effectively lodging uses without permits or approvals and in buildings and in areas where lodging may not be permitted. The presence of short-term rentals can also lead to the reduction of affordable housing supply by removing dwelling units from the market and driving up demand for the limited remaining housing supply. This can result in fewer available units and increased prices or rents for those units. I mean, really, that's just what I wanted to get on the record.
Good, no, thanks for doing that. I've got it. Our aims are to regulate short-term rentals, which today are unpermitted, they're illegal. We know what's going on. The village code has never said you can do that. In New York State zoning law, if it's not expressly permitted, it is considered to be prohibited. Hey, it doesn't say I can't have an elephant. It doesn't say you can have an elephant, okay? But to regulate short-term rentals, which in essence would be allowing them to be here, which is not the case currently. And then accessory dwelling units in a manner that will support affordable housing and preserve the pervasively residential character of the village. Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Anything else? Okay, let's have a Tivoli conversation. Thank you all for being here. We're eager to listen. Dan.
Thanks, Joel. So should we talk about all 3 issues at the same time?
Yeah, I think we'll try to keep it loose and informal and see how we do, or maybe we'll start to structure it. I don't know. If you think your comment, go for it. Just talk.
Okay, because I got a lot of comments.
Good.
So I guess starting with the STRs, I mean, the way I see it, so I'm Dan, by the way, live here on Broadway. Also, my address is P.O. Box 1, which means my opinion counts more than all of yours.
Now you know where to send the hate mail.
Yeah, right. I was also on the ZRC that helped think through some of these issues a couple of years ago. I think when it comes to STRs, I think there's a danger that they'll be exploited by speculators, and I think that I'm with the board in identifying that as a problem. Right? We don't want people to cobble up property for the sole purpose of renting them as STRs. It could really howl out the community. But on the other hand, as we know, STRs bring visitors who might not otherwise have the opportunity to hang in Tivoli. As you mentioned, it gives homeowners some extra income, so there are good things about them for sure. So thinking about the legislation, I think that some modest, easily enforceable regulations are in order. I think that a lot of the regulations that are included are maybe a little too burdensome, and so I just want to take a couple of them, just give a couple of quick opinions. By the way, I'm also here as a part of a new delegation in Tivoli called Tivoli Tomorrow. We're a group of 40 or so residents who are dedicated to building a smart, sustainable, and equitable Tivoli. So raise your hand if you're part of Tivoli Tomorrow. Okay. So we drafted these together, and people are going to have their own things to say, but we kind of drafted these together as a group. So when hosted by an owner or designated agent who stays on the property, so the rules, STRs are only permissible when hosted by an owner or designated agent who stays on the property. I think that, having a registered local agent is really sensible, but I don't think the agent or the owner should be required to actually stay in the house when it's being used as an STR. I think, what are traditionally called unhosted rentals are fine if all these other rules, some of which are really good, are followed. Only single-family homes, that seems a little excessive. In our opinion. The rule that only one bedroom can be rented out if you do an STR seems a little bit excessive as well. Maybe a lot excessive, actually. And kind of at odds with a lot of the best practices that we looked at. And just, we don't really understand what that regulation accomplishes. It's like, and I think, in my view, and I think a lot of folks here, somebody who goes away for 2 weeks should be able to rent their house, and come back, and right? Because it's better to have a full house than an empty one, right? So 40 nights a year as a cap. I think having a cap is a good idea. I think 40 is maybe too low. Operating permit specific to an owner, non-transferable, that all sounds good. The lottery, I think, it seems like if all the other rules are followed, that maybe a lottery is not necessary, like a cap on the number of units is not necessary. Might want to rethink that. And I think for transit, the idea that residential occupancy only, right, that STRs aren't, you can't have gatherings there. That seems a little excessive. I think so long as the noise ordinance is well enforced, it seems like we have a tool to mitigate against the worst effects of that. So those are just some quick thoughts. I'll just say a few words about ADUs and then I'll shut up. Sorry I'm talking so long.
Well, do you want to do STRs first and then move into ADUs? What do you think?
B&Bs.
What?
B&Bs.
No, I was putting.
Well, Joe was suggesting we just roll it all through. I promise I'll be quick. So yeah, I think it's so awesome that we're thinking about ADUs. ADUs can be so good for Tivoli, and I'm so in support of them, and I think they're a great way to kind of address our housing shortage. They're not going to solve it, but they're going to help, and they're a great thing. I think that the regulations are just way too strict, like way too strict. So I think some of the regulations are really sensible, like limiting the size of ADUs, requiring the property owner to live in one of the two structures. That's like standard best practice stuff. But like the minimum lot size thing is, I think, what bugs me the most, because just like we did a quick analysis, and basically 80%, like under the current rules, 80% of the lots in the heart of the village, right, in the R15, are completely ineligible for an ADU. 80%. Are ineligible. This is exactly where we should be encouraging ADUs, because this is where we have walkability, we have close proximity to transit, and this is where we want to build, I think, in the village. So there's this rule that not only, we all know the minimum lot sizes are already way too big, and we need to redo the zoning so that you can build a house on a lot that's smaller than 15,000 square feet. This legislation says, no, actually, you have to have even more than 15,000 square feet to build an ADU. Right? It says that if you're in the R1A, in the historic district, you need an acre of land in order to build an ADU. That to me is nuts. I would want to go in the other direction and make it less. You need less land than the minimum lot size to build. So I think that's really a problem. I think in the R15 outside the historic overlay, only 30% of properties are eligible. In the R1A, like North Road, only 50% of properties have a big enough lot for an ADU. In the R2A, East Tivoli, Clay Hill Road, only about 33% of properties would have large enough lot size. It's like, why are we making this legislation if so few properties are eligible for this thing, which is such a good thing and can help us. I'll stop laughing, but I think the minimum setback rules are too onerous. I think the off-street parking rules are unnecessary. I don't think we need to require people to add a parking lot to their space. I'm going to shut up now. Thanks.
Linda?
I am the polar opposite of your view.
Right.
Having lived in communities where STRs have just destroyed the cultural landscape and devastated the sense of community, I think these STR rules make a lot of sense. And if I were to tinker with the various STR rules and make them looser, I would definitely want to see that the lottery became smaller. Everything you're saying just terrifies the hell out of me. And I think I represent a large group as well as your group. So I would really like to see ultimately this come to a vote of the entire community as opposed to just be based on what this small number of people here seem to think about it.
Well, I just want to point out, this is a great start, and this is exactly what these issues are, and this is how hard it can be, and Tivoli can do this. And also, unfortunately, we don't operate in a direct democracy, so you've elected your legislators, and we're going to do it, but that's why we talk to you, so it won't come up to a plebiscite. Yeah. Mar?
Hi, so I've had a house here in Tivoli for 10 years now, and I just want to speak as one of the people that I believe this law is trying to address, as somebody who wouldn't have been able to keep their home without some short-term rentals. So it's been a really important part of me being able to stay in the community, and as such, I'd like to keep it with restrictions, obviously, which we're discussing, so I'm very happy to be here and discussing what regulations that will go under. And I agree with everything that Dan laid out. Like I said, this is sort of we had some consensus meetings we were speaking about, but I wanted to speak to just a couple of points that really affect me in particular. Like I said, I love the ideas around annual operating permit, with the fees going to some kind of housing development, I don't know, some sort of addressing Tivoli's housing issues. Lodging taxes, placing caps, all of this type of stuff I think is great. A couple of concerns is the 1 bedroom per property. I have a 3-bedroom home. If I want to rent it for less than whatever the number of nights we get, I feel like this is a little bit of a burden that somebody couldn't put their kid to bed in the other bedroom, and am I going to be fined? What's going to happen? Would that be a bad thing, even if it's just a couple renting the house? So I would like to see that go away. The cap of 40 nights a year, I'd like to see expended just a little. I'd personally like to see that go up. Annual operating permit is fine, all of this stuff. The lottery is the interesting question, right? I also don't want to see 100 STRs, absolutely. So in some sense, some sort of cap, I'm probably in line with. However, what my concern is that I have it 1 year, I count on this, the 10 days a year I do this for income, and I don't get the lottery next year. That's going to be a budgeting issue for me, and that's going to insert unpredictability. Perhaps there's a compromise where it'd be, if you already have one, you got it for next year automatically, but then there's only so many new ones allotted for the year. I think there's probably some area in there in which we can work on that takes away the unpredictability for people who are village residents, who do want to obey all the laws and want to be able to count on that, plan on that for the next year. The gatherings, parties, weddings, meetings, banquets are prohibited. I have a problem with this one because I want to say if you want to have your grandma's birthday party in the yard and have a few people over, this is an okay thing. And the idea that a noise ordinance could keep a lid on this is one thing. However, I also know that noise ordinances are, sometimes haphazardly enforced in town. So I'd love to see some more discussion around that, around what to do. I think that's it. I want to let other people speak, but that was a bunch of stuff.
Probably small enough people can get a second time at bat.
Yeah. So, but the 1 bedroom thing I think is particularly something we need to discuss, because that would prohibit me from basically being able to rent my home. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Masha. I'm a resident, I live on Broadway, and I'm also a business owner down the street. As you can see, I'm wearing a Homes Are Not Hotels shirt, so we in Tivoli tomorrow have discussed everything at length. And I agree with every statement so far that has been said, almost entirely. I do think that, and know actually, that short-term rentals, especially unrestricted short-term rentals, have devastated communities that are very close to ours. I also come here as somebody who lives in an apartment that is rented, and as far as I can see, I know a lot of people in the audience and a lot of people on the board, almost everyone I can see are homeowners, and that is something that I would love to be, but I'm not at the moment, and I don't see that happening anytime in the near future. And we have very few apartments in the village. I can't afford a condo, for sure. And currently, this proposed law says that bed and breakfasts that are, as far as I understand, bed and breakfasts that are 1 or 2 bedrooms could be in the business district, unhosted year-round, should you submit a proposal, and should it be a a single-family home. So my apartment would be that, could be that. And there's so many single-family homes on the main strip that could be apartments or are rentals, extremely valuable, and I just feel like that's opening up a really dangerous situation there. It was confusing to me when I was reading the law, when we were all discussing it for a few weeks, that the bed and breakfast rule of 1-2 bedrooms basically makes it be a permitted unhosted STR, so long as you comply with bed and breakfast regulations. So, not a huge fan of that, but just want to make sure I see this. Yeah, other than that, if somebody's owning a home and has a bedroom to rent out sometimes for maybe a whole house for a weekend that they're leaving, or 2 bedrooms while they're there, I don't see why it should be a problem for them to rent it out for a limited amount of nights a year, so long as they're either on the property or the village has the contact information of the agent or the person who can be contacted and is very close by and can come by, and it's not just like random people coming over and nobody can contact them or, do anything about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Naveen?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Naveen. I live on North Road. And, it's good, I think, that you're bringing both the SDR and ADU discussions together, because I think these are both items that should be addressed in every community. We know that we have a shortage of housing, affordable housing, and so considering ADUs, I think, is a very good idea. And I agree with a lot of what Dan has said in terms of where they can be located ends up being not very productive. The other part of it is SDRs. I understand that SDRs do create some divisions in a community. I don't know if it's hyperbole to say that communities have been devastated, because I think those communities still exist. I think that the list of rules you have here, some of them make a lot of sense. And in particular, when you have particular restrictions such as any parcel owner with 1 SDR permit cannot obtain a second permit, all of a sudden speculators are out of the picture, right? Because now you can only have one.
Multiple property speculators.
Pardon?
Multiple property
Multiple
speculators.
properties, yeah. So, I think that's one very sensible restriction you have. I think I also agree that the restriction on 1 bedroom per property and 40 nights a year, they're both sort of arbitrary. I think they need more discussion and understanding of how SDRs operate and what is attractive to a family that might want to come and check out Tivoli. They come with their kids. They have to be able to stay, come to the same place for what might end up being more than 40 nights in a year with their kids and decide to move with you. Because we've seen many incidents where people coming to SDRs have eventually also started looking around the village to buy properties themselves. Those are my comments.
And I just want to ask, so I've heard 3 times the number 40, right? Too low. Tell me some numbers.
60.
60 to
90.
Go on, so sorry.
60 to 90 or 1 to 90?
60 to 90.
All right, just curious, it's helpful to actually.
Yeah.
What do we know what the areas around us have? I know I've seen them, but I don't remember like what Red Hook has or Rhinebeck. Like, I think it should be.
I know that,
I'm
I know
sorry, I
that
don't
in
know
some,
off the
in
top
some
of my
other cities, they allow people to rent their homes out up to 90 days a year, like in Philadelphia.
It just knows.
Okay, didn't mean to interrupt the discussion. Yes.
Well, I have 3 thoughts, and one of them is a little bit around how we frame limits or caps. Because I was thinking about the single room and not being able to rent a whole house, and what Dan said about like, if you go away on tour or on vacation, like 2 weeks of being able to do that could really help pay the monthly bills. So I'm curious about a possibility of like being able to rent out, if like an owner, if you own your house, if you could rent out the entire house short term, but that there was a cap on the length of that short term. So in other words, if you went away for a week, you could rent out your whole house for a week, but you can't rent out your whole house for a week 16 times a year, and you can't rent out your whole house for 4 months. Oh, well, I guess you can.
That you can.
I guess you can. Okay, so I guess I'm just trying to think about reframing another way to think about a cap, because personally, I think the practice is largely to try to rent out a whole, like, as either the renter or the landlord for the moment. It's about a whole house. Like, I think it's like families or people that try to get a whole house, not like a twin bed down the room from the folks who live there. So I just wonder if reframing a cap that way might be useful. And I forgot my other 2 points.
Give you a second to turn it back.
Okay, I'll think of it.
Some of the single-family home language, I mean, that's about, you've got duplexes and multifamily homes. So places like the Hotel Maury on the corner there, our brick building with Town Crier. We really need to rename the Village Crier. Gotta get to that. You know, you couldn't have an SDR in there, right? That's the idea, because you're living in an apartment building. So anyway, Tina, and then Hayden.
So just in the opposite side of that, renting out a house, a whole house for a certain amount of time to make, like, so you could have your own house that you live in and then buy up an empty house and rent that to make the income, but then that house is off the market for other people to live in full time. So like, so having an unhosted full house that somebody could rent out, somebody's is taking up that real estate for somebody else to not be able to live in. That's how
But I think that could be managed by the fact that any owner is would only be allowed one permit.
But now you're 2 houses in the village. You own a house, you live here,
Okay.
and then you have an empty. I'm thinking like the
Yeah.
opposite. So like, because
Yeah.
I think the whole idea is the unhosted versus hosted. So you have the hosted house, you would have to live there. So you're taking one residence and using it limited
Yep.
towards what they're allowing. If you have unhosted, you live in your house, and now you have another property that somebody else, Masha, wants to buy, but she can't because you have it and you're renting it, which is driving the prices up, so people can't afford it. Like, so that's the other side of
I
it.
think I could clarify, because I think I mean owner occupied.
Primary residence.
Primary residents being allowed to rent
Okay.
out their whole house.
Okay.
And that in tandem with the law that says if you're granted one SDR, you wouldn't be granted 2 regardless of how many properties.
So that would be a key clarification.
Yeah, sorry.
I just want to say real quick that even without the primary residence rule, I don't think I agree with you. I don't think speculators are going to buy a house that they can only Airbnb for 40 days or 60 days. They would lose a lot of money.
But there are people who have done it.
All right, we got get the conch shell back and keep this moving, but I love the conversation. The time will allow us to get there. Hayden was next, and then Jim, did you have your hand up? You're on deck.
Yeah, so I think that to go on
something that Adrian seemed to be pointing towards. I do think that there is sort of a qualitative difference between hosted and unhosted. And you know, in our discussions, we were talking about a number that represents the total, and partially I haven't really been pushing on like, can we separate those, because I figured that's probably an enforcement nightmare. But to me, it's different if you have somebody that's staying in a room in your house, or even that you're renting 2 rooms in your house, but you're there, then versus you're renting out your full house. And if there were different caps for those, if that were a thing that could be done, and maybe some of these companies, you know, I don't know, maybe they, you know, you ask them and they say, oh sure, yeah, we can do that. We can say, oh, they changed the listing to it's the whole house now. I don't know. But if that could be done, then I also think that having separate caps would make sense. And then you can have maybe
Yes, have a higher cap.
a higher cap for hosted, and a substantially reduced cap for unhosted, which would, I think, meet the needs that we discussed in our meetings about this. And because I am very concerned. Obviously, Hudson is a wonderful example of a community that has had entire neighborhoods, you know, gutted and yes, devastated by STRs. And yeah, that's about it. Just separate caps, I think, could be helpful if possible.
Thank you. Jim?
I'm a fan of Dan Dioka and his analysis of this issue at P.O. Box 1. He's done a great job of getting people together and discussing these things. Obviously, even over here, there's not unanimity, but the tendency is toward letting regular people welcome in other regular people to Tivoli through short-term rentals. I don't know about devastation in other places, but this seems to be a modest, common sense thing to do. So the question is caps, hosted or not hosted, how many bedrooms? And I think Mara makes the great point that most of this money that's earned is going to be put towards regular people trying to pay their mortgage. And regular families coming here in summer, and it seems perfectly reasonable to me that a family spend a week in a house and have a lovely time, especially if they're from the city or something, and just crinkle their bare feet in our grassy backyard. It's a beautiful thing that brings economic prosperity to the people who live here as well. It's a good thing. So I myself am in favor of, you know, a 60 to 90 day cap. No one's going to buy a house to speculate on a maximum of 60 days rental a year. That makes no sense at all.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. So allowing this to happen with a reasonable cap is not going to, realistically, it's not going to shut out potential renters. It's really not. And now ADUs, our analysis, Dan's analysis, is, and so, which we come to comprehend and agree on, is though the ADUs is technically permitted in every district, functionally it's almost all but banned by the restrictions that currently exist in this legislation. The setbacks, the size of the lots, and it's too bad because it's such an elegant solution. It's modest again. It's small structures for regular people to live here and contribute to our community. That's not a change of character. That's an enhancement of the character of a village and people who know each other and who walk to places and bump into each other. So we are not supporting any devastation or even maximum overhaul. We just want to see some of these onerous rules loosened and people encouraged to do this rather than so restricted that it can't be done in most instances. Final point, the permit and the fees should be, you know, reasonable and not, a choke point.
What's reasonable?
I would say one night's, but, you know, if other people want to boost it to 2, why not? Whatever, that's discussable. Yeah, something reasonable, again.
One night for, like, if somebody can rent their place for $2,000 a month, and somebody else can rent it for $500 a month, like the average, or would it be according to what the person's profit margin is?
What did you say?
I'm
One
sorry, I'm
night?
trying to listen to this whispering, because it seemed interesting. Sorry, I missed something.
You said one night.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at some other, we've been speaking with this company, Granicus, who's like the only game in town for monitoring things, and they have made a smart business model where, this is who the town of Red Hook is using, this is who Dutchess County is using, and Dutchess County actually wants to make sure they get their host tax, so they're paying any municipality, they'll cover modules 1 and 2 with Granicus for us or anyone else, so the fees are about closing the rest of that. And the recommendations and other examples are like 1 night or 2 nights.
Okay,
So,
that's in the reasonable.
if your night's
realm to
two,
my
as I
mind.
said earlier, if it's $250 a night, then maybe it's $250. If you choose 2, it'll be $500 a year.
Right. Now we're talking. Now we're talking pragmatics,
Yeah.
which is good.
We just started doing that? John?
Yeah, somebody who moved here over 30 years ago, I moved into a residential development of single-family homes with single families. And to see the houses being used now specifically for just rental purposes, to me, just takes away from where I moved to 30 years ago. Yeah, I understand the world's changed and the short-term rental. I'm all for owner-occupied. You've got some at least control over, you have someone, a neighbor you can go talk to face-to-face and say, hey, what happened last night with your tenants? Versus somebody who's got a P.O. box down in Poughkeepsie or Rhinebeck, like several of the houses in the subdivision have. 1 or 2 bedrooms, that I don't know. I mean, I guess there's room for some, adjustment. Maybe it is a little too tight. I personally, to me, I think the 40 days is more than enough for someone who's just looking to offset their costs. I mean, if you bought the house for investment purposes, then you really bought the house for the wrong purpose if it's a single-family home in the first place. And as the ADUs, there's a lot of talk I hear about ADUs and being privileged to have an ADU. There's no privilege to be able to subdivide your property into a separate unit. If there's room, sure, great, yeah. But to try to cut back on the requirements of the development, of a single-family home, I think you have to be careful with it as well. So I think it was a really well-thought-out legislation as I read through it. And again, fully support the owner-occupied, and please don't stray away from that.
Yeah.
Hi, this is going to probably have a bunch of different parts to it because that's just how I usually am, and I would apologize, but it's too late at this point. I'm Anna Sifter, I live on North Road. I want to bring us back to something that I think that many of the people in Tivoli tomorrow and throughout the village hold an agreement on, which hasn't been talked about maybe enough, which is that with these laws, what we are aiming for is to protect this community. Protect it from becoming a wasteland of speculation. Whether it's, fairly small developers or like giant LLCs or whatever, there is a huge shift when we move from thinking about the village and the buildings within it as houses where people live, whether it's rental. I'm a renter. I've been renting for 5 years. I don't think I'll ever be able to afford a home. And I still consider myself part of the community, or homeowners. There is a huge difference between that being your community and there being a continual turnover enabled. A turnover that just sort of facilitates this as a pleasure grounds and not a community. I think that we already have an extreme dearth of housing in the village, and I think we need to be protective of that. I also do want to echo what many of my friends and neighbors who have, I want to echo them and thank them because they've educated me a great deal. Touch your neighbors, y'all. I do believe that if someone is hosting folks in their spare bedroom, their kids have moved out and they want to rent out an extra room, with proper specifications and controls put in order, there's a way to allow short-term rentals that are not destructive. However, those rules need to be very defined, and we need to be clear why we are implementing them. There seems to be some sort of squidginess where a lot of people want a lot of different things. And we might agree on what sort of rules we want, but not necessarily what we'd be using them for. And I think we need to look at these laws as not just technicalities, but an overall plan for what we want Tivoli to be. And that refers to the ADUs as well. In my mind, Tivoli as a place with short-term rentals that are folks who live here or who buy a house here and want to rent out a spare bedroom to supplement their income, or rent out for a week when they go on vacation somewhere else to supplement their income. I can see that. That's reasonable. That's people who remain in our community. Any attempt to flip, and dear Lord, I am really the oldest person on earth for loud alarms going off. Not to be ageist, but yeah, here goes my watch beeping. If we're looking at things like that, if we're looking at ways that people who live here who would want to put down roots here can maintain their presence in the community, that is one thing. If we are looking at, and I think this is where some of the confusion about the B&B stuff versus SDR stuff, a great deal of the B&B language right now looks like a loophole for STRs for me, frankly.
Walk me through the hole, because I want to tell you how it's not there.
Okay. Let me bring up the language, but the fact that there's no limitation of nights per year, and it could either be hosted or have a designated agent who stays on property, or unhosted if it's 1 or 2 bedrooms, it starts to get more fluid. I think bed and breakfasts should be their own definition of thing that operate like the NC or the inn or the hotel. I don't know. The barn, I don't know the full situation there. But I think that there is there are things that we can allow safely, but it requires the restrictions that we've been talking about. And it requires reasonable restrictions, many of which have been named, but I think that we as a community do need to be looking at this not just for Tivoli today, but for Tivoli tomorrow. Sorry. Putting buzzwords in there.
You're going on a bit long here, so do you have anything, is anyone else? I mean, I'll let you keep going, I just want to...
No, let other people go, and then I'll have more rambling
Okay.
at some point, probably to you in your office tomorrow.
Yeah, and I just, it won't be tomorrow. But, yeah, Deputy Mayor, all next 12 days. So I just want to touch briefly. So, you know, it doesn't happen often, frankly, but there's difference of opinion on this board on all this stuff. So it's been a little more fun, maybe, more interesting. Sometimes it's very obvious we're all in lockstep and let's get this done, do the next thing. But so, and you know, numbers like 40, 60, 90, like that's the real useful stuff to us, right? On the B&Bs and the STRs, so as defined, someone who gets a B&B as like a money-making thing, it's more advantageous to them to be a B&B under these rules. If they just become an STR, then suddenly they went from every night of the year to 40 or 50 or 60, right? So I'm not sure, and that loophole currently, under our existing code, someone could come in, outbid people, buy up 7 things on any street in our village, on Lothrop, Memorial, Montgomery, come in and get 7 bed and breakfast permits from the planning board and put their designated agents in, and we lose a whole block of residents of community. So I'm just, maybe our language hasn't been good because I've been having these definitional discussions with other people recently, but the way we wrote it, the bed and breakfast, it's just in the GB and the RB, so we're protecting these other residential neighborhoods. And one more thing, our goals are, just to restate, we don't want the village with limited housing stock, as we all know, to buy or rent, getting gobbled up by speculators who are not invested in this community at all, and gutting our community, right? So the details, but that's still, I just want to keep that up there. And additionally, the reason, in a law that is, in my mind, about affordability, if we can thread the needle between someone who's living here, their kids are grown, costs are going up, everything's more expensive, staying here by renting a room, maybe more, maybe 2 rooms, that's affordability for that person, in my mind. But what we don't want is someone coming in and taking that house off the market, and they don't even live here, right?
That is why I do think the primary ownership is a key detail that should be preserved in what.
Yeah, and the last thing on that is there's case law in the United States of America. A lot of communities have made laws that say owner occupied. Those are being challenged, and they've been overturned in New Orleans already. And so as we've been drafting this, we've been working in that environment. And so that's where we came up with owner or designated agent. And that designated agent is, you should think of it like a tenant. I mean, they live in the house. Just saying. Someone who hasn't gone and then back around again.
So, hi, I'm Stacy. I'm a renter on Washburn now. I was a renter for 3 years on Montgomery previously, and had to scramble to thankfully find a place, but it was very stressful and scary because it came down to the wire. But about this bed and breakfast part, what is the distinction for the permit? Like, what do you have to do? What hoops do you have to go through? What do you have to pay to say this is, you know, I'm gonna make this a bed and breakfast? What is the?
So you're gonna go to the village planning board, you're gonna contact the deputy clerk and say, I wanna get on the agenda. And you're gonna come before the planning board and get a special permit. So they're gonna look at a map of the property, they're gonna read the code for that district, they're gonna see if you have enough parking. It's a higher level of oversight than just going to the building department and saying, I want my STR license. But, and you know, whatever law we write, and I love what Jim said about real people. I like real people more than the unreal people too. But whatever law we write, it's for everyone. It's for the speculators also. So we just need to be careful. I mean, it's nice that we haven't had disastrous problems so far in this community, but all last year after the pandemic, my phone rang every week. Hey, Mayor, your town's really hot. It's not a town. Your town's really hot. What are your STR rules? Well, they're illegal. Well, I was thinking about picking up a couple properties. I mean, I had that set to me. So that's what got me scared, and I'm like, we gotta get on this, guys. So anyway, Jonathan's been waiting.
A couple of questions. One, just tacking on to this, the permit fee question, is, I don't know if there's balance sheet that you all have in mind, but is the idea that the fees could somehow subsidize or pay for the enforcement, all the administration?
Yeah, it's just
Or
administration and enforcement.
Will there be some expected surplus that could go to
No.
other programs?
Can't make profit on your fee schedule.
Will the
Bad
village-
municipal practice.
Will the village have to fill in, subsidize? the
We're
enforcement
hoping
at
to
all?
set a fee, I mean, if you do a good job with your fee schedule, it covers the resources needed to regulate the thing, right? So, there wouldn't be any extra money. You know, we'd have to engage, perhaps Granicus and pay them an annual fee. We would, from time to time, Granicus would say, hey, someone's been doing this illegally, and then we have to go to the building inspector and code enforcement officer and say, go over there, write them a letter, and it's just that administrative time. That's what the fees are for. And I think something around the 200 to 400, like we're talking about, is certainly adequate. I don't think it needs to be more than that.
So the goal is for it to self-support.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, if someone's doing, in all things in the village, you know, if someone's doing something a little particular, it's like not fair that other people are subsidizing your
Yeah,
particular thing,
absolutely.
right? That's why there's escrow when you go to the planning board, yeah.
So if we could just tack on another
Yeah, sure.
comment
Yeah.
question. So as to the ADUs, I mean, I think the ADU is very exciting, and I appreciate the work that's gone into even just getting it out there. SDR's kind of arrived here, but the ADU seems a little bit more of a effort to envision. I live in a small lot on Pine Street, like a lot of lots in the village, and just to echo some of the concerns about the bulk regulations, I'm in the same situation, and I'm trying to, not to take it personally, but seeing that the bulk reg was actually for lot area was actually increasing in the ADU proposal, seemed a little bit odd to me, and also as a member of the zoning board who could potentially be getting a lot of variance applications if this goes through. That's another potential issue. Like the best kind of zoning, really, there aren't a lot of variance applications because things fit. And I think right now there's a mismatch between the bulk regs and the village itself and what we want it to be. So I think all that needs maybe some more attention.
And you're including the existing bulk reg, right?
The existing bulk regs.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, as in addition to the increase for lot area. Yeah, I guess.
We can circle back. Franz?
What's that?
Franz is,
Yeah, well, just very briefly in the conversation and in the intent clause, it seems like there's a shared interest in increasing the housing supply, increasing the affordable housing supply, right? So that the village just doesn't, so that people can live here who aren't in a position to be homeowners. And it seems like there's a that discouraging the STRs, but also encouraging the ADUs addresses that.
About our intentions coming through. It's hard to manifest your intentions sometimes, but okay, great. Tom hasn't gone, and then the gentleman behind.
I just got a quick question. Is there going to be another increase in burden on the infrastructure of like police, fire, and the whole 9 yards that go along with this stuff? And
Yeah,
you
you
want
got
to do more
another
houses, you want to do all of this? You got to remember, fire department is volunteer. I mean, that's a burden on us. I mean, over the years, we went from 30 calls a year, we're up over 350 calls now a year for EMS and fire calls. So you only got a certain group of volunteers that do it. It's not like everybody who comes in is going to, I'm going to go join the local fire department, or I'm going to, become a police officer in Red Hook, or wherever we have to pay to have patrol the area. I mean, we got to look at that too. I mean, it's nice to have all of this stuff. We got a lot of houses in Tivoli, don't get me wrong, but a lot of them, and nothing against BART students or any of that stuff, but a lot of the owners, people here, rent out their houses to BART students. I mean, so that takes up a lot of the available housing that's around here. And now adding on to the short-term rentals and extra housing, it just seems like it's the same thing. You're just doing the same thing People are gonna come in, buy the house, rent it out. And granted, like they said, it don't make sense to buy it and rent it for 60 days, 90 days, but they'll rent it to park students. I mean, you know.
Well, obviously, if we add dwelling units, if we add ADUs, which is in fact our goal, you know, yeah, more burden on the sewer system and the water system and the roads and the fire department and the emergency services and all that stuff, you know. Presumably those parcels' tax burden will go up because it'll be more developed with another thing, but it's something to think about. And when you know, look at communities where a large part of them are transient, that's a home that's not gonna house your volunteer firefighter. That person's not, you know, so it's an important thing to think about. There's someone over here. All right, we're gonna start going around. Second, oh yeah, sorry, thanks for running.
I just want to make this simple comment here. I've heard that the term affordable housing thrown around a lot in reference to the ADUs, and I just am a little confused because how do ADUs automatically equate to affordable housing?
I wouldn't say they automatically equate, and personally, I'm a little skeptical that the Village of Tivoli, New York, with whatever capacity we can create, is going to put a dent in what is a state and national and certainly regional problem. But in principle, more supply, lowest price.
I don't believe it.
I don't think there's a through line at all.
Yeah.
You know, and whoever's controlling that ADU will have control over, you know, what they rent it for. You know, we're dealing with other market forces for sure. So I don't mean to be glib about the affordability, but I mean you're correct. It's not necessarily.
Can I just drive my political career in the ditch now?
Shall we let her?
Do it.
I mean, it seems like we pay lip service to the idea of affordable housing, right? Like, we are, for the most part, homeowners here, right?
Yeah.
We are privileged. And we are all, by right, now, able to rent out. If we have a spare room, we can rent it out. If we have 2 spare rooms, we can rent them out for more than 30 days. That is totally legal, right? There are a lot of people who work in the lovely restaurants that we have who can't afford to live here. We have people who are volunteer, you know, firefighters who can't afford to live here. STRs are not. They're driving the price up, okay? So it's very nice to want to invite more people into the village and like let them experience grass underneath their toes. But like, what about the people who are part of this community now who can't afford to be here, right? Who can't afford to get off work and take off their shoes in their yard, right? Like, small is beautiful, less is more, and let's appreciate what we have before trying to bring more people in who we don't actually have room, when we don't have room for the people that are here. I mean, I was talking to Masha earlier about, you know, yeah, we do need more housing for, like, you know, when somebody's parents come to visit. Okay, I want to live in a village where I know everybody here, and Masha can call me up and say, listen, my folks are coming into town, and I know that your family's away. Can they stay for the weekend? And I can just say, yeah, because we know each other. Like, it's not on us to solve the housing problems of the American tourism, okay?
I think you're still in office.
3 more weeks.
Yeah, Linda, we'll get around to everybody. Absolutely.
I have a question, actually, because something you said, because I am a fan of ADUs. What is it that makes them an impossibility on certain lots? Is it existing building codes and setbacks, or is it this 250 square foot minimum? And how did you come to know this? I mean,
well, it's right there in the lot, and you know, it's all those things. It's so, for example, if you're in the, you know, R15, you need an acre of, according to the rules that we have here, you need an acre to do an ADU. Even though you only need 15,000 square feet, roughly a third of an acre, to build a house, which is already way, way too much. Most of the lots in Tivoli are a fraction of 15,000 square feet, but that's a whole nother issue. So to answer your question, yeah, if you just make a map and you look at all the properties in the R15 that have an acre, you go from this many to this many. If you look at all the properties in the R1A that have the big enough lots to build an ADU, it goes from this many to this many. I would just love to hear, like we've been blabbing, I would love to hear y'all talk and give you a chance to sort of just talk about why, for the ADUs, it just like, you know, when I saw this, I was like, this is great, man, we're gonna get ADUs, and what a fantastic thing. The only way, I mean, I have a lot to say in response to what you said, Emily, we'll take it up at the bar sometime. I strongly believe the only way we can preserve the things we love about Tivoli is through growth and change. I strongly believe that. I think that ADUs are not, building is the only way we're going to get new firefighters. Building is the only way we're going to get more people, more apartments who can afford more places. It is supply and demand. It's the only tool we have so that's a whole other thing. But I would love to hear your thoughts about why, it seems like, you know, you want to legislate or legalize ADUs, which is fantastic. But then 80% of the lots are ineligible because of the minimum lot size requirement.
If you think about it, like when we talked about chicken coops, right? Like not every lot in the village could have a chicken coop, right? Because there's not enough space. So like, I mean, the lots on Faroe, they're very small. Like where would you put one that you didn't have to like be on, you know, set your ladder up on somebody else's property to paint it, or, you know, like not every lot, like not everything is appropriate for every part of the village, right? Like that's why we have different zoning districts.
Of course, but you look at cities around the world.
We're not in a city.
Villages around the world, towns around the world are doing everything they can to create ADUs because they are a way, as Jim said, to add to the housing stock without changing the character of the place. They're the lowest hanging fruit. They're the easiest way to add buildings to the housing stock.
But how would
The
that not
simplest
change
way.
the character?
I don't know, I mean, because they're in backyards, because there are regulations. I'm not saying that there should be anarchy, but there's so many precedents all over the world for how villages have gone about and towns have gone about legislating ADUs and integrating them into the fabric of the community. Yes, there need to be bulk regulations, but we have bulk regulations for our accessory buildings. People have garages. Those have to be set back. People have all kinds of things that count as accessory structures. So there are ways to regulate that bulk, right? I would love to hear why. It's not just the bulk regulations. It needs a special permit, and you got to put in a parking lot. It just seems like a parking spot. It just seems like a good thing, but that you don't really want. So what's the point? I would love to hear your thoughts about how it became so restrictive.
Short answer?
Yeah.
So we can keep talking and I talk less. We want there to be ADUs. It hasn't been allowed. We understand that's low hanging fruit. I'm in lots of municipal conversations with peer communities, and we know we've got a housing crunch here. So we want ADUs, and you know, I think clearly you've done a very tight analysis on how that actually translates, and that's useful to us. And you know, why did we write a law that's so restrictive? To have a place to start. To have a place to start. I want to just be really clear about that.
Yeah.
You know, so. But there's a longer answer, but we'll keep going. All right.
Okay, I want to circle back around to the D&D thing. Sorry, but I think it's kind of, because it's not the owner-occupied 3 or 4 bedroom B&B question that's an issue for me. And I actually think those shouldn't be restricted necessarily to the district. But setting that aside, it's the 1 and 2 bedroom unhosted B&B that I somehow still feel like is a loophole and would love to hear what I'm missing. So from what I understand, tell me if I'm wrong, you can have a 1 to 2 bedroom unhosted if you get the B&B permit, which means you can have unlimited people there. I mean, it's not subject to the cap that the STR cap is, correct? Then you can have people there all year. So that basically is, yes. So that's basically taking a 1 to 2 bedroom off the market and making it a permanent Airbnb. And it feels like that goes 100% against the intent of what many of us have said is the intent for this town, for this village, is to not have basically a permanent short-term rental. And so that is confusing to me.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
If you want to call a bed and breakfast a permanent short-term rental, I'm okay with that, just so we're speaking the same language. And then, you know, in my opinion, by limiting it to, this came up because we've got single-family homes in the GB, not a lot of them, but there are some, and they're big, that could be like a little hotel. So that's where it was coming from. That's what we were thinking about. And the unhosted one is because we have, I don't want to say unhosted, correct that. Hosted by a local agent, because technically that's a little different. We've got some retail space on the ground floor and residential space upstairs. So it was about accommodating some of those. Now, most of those could also be a long-term rental.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing.
So that feels like that's taking housing stock away from people who live and work in Tivoli, and that seems basically against the intent of what we're talking about tonight. So I'd like to flag that as problematic for me.
So eliminate bed and breakfast and let the two grandfather in and.
Should we have no bed and breakfast in the village?
Well, no.
I know, keep the ins, keep
Just
the
that.
I said two grandfather.
I just want to, I'm wondering if this is worth asking, because how many little hotels does Tivoli really need? You know, shouldn't there be a cap on how many B&Bs can be in this town?
Yep. Oh, that was the other thing you said. Somebody could have 7 B&B licenses.
Currently, that's the rules.
I feel like that should obviously be changed.
Well, good. We got something right.
Okay.
And also, you know, it hasn't really been said tonight, but it was said a lot at our last one 14 months ago, and it comes up. Lodging. We don't have enough, we don't have enough housing, we also don't have enough lodging, right? And there's lots of wonderful things about coming here, and there's no place for grandma to stay when she comes, and like, that's an issue for sure. I would love to see somebody open up some lodging. We have current code that allows motels and hotels under certain conditions, but I don't want to see our single-family housing stock cut into to accommodate the lodging need, because I think it's for the long-term residents and members of the community.
Same thing for the 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for those of
I don't
our
disagree with
community
that.
who can't buy homes, who are renters and will be renters for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. You know, we're kind of crafty. Sometimes we write stuff, so when we dangle it out, people will say the thing that we want, you know? Doesn't mean, and there's, you know, I can't tell you how hard we've all worked on this. We really have spent hours and hours trying to just get to this point, because it's really complicated. There's a lot of difference of opinion. Adrian?
Yeah. All of this is just also making me think that while appropriate restrictions on STRs do disincentivize speculation, I feel like frequently those restrictions are accompanied by an assumption that they will preserve and or create long-term rental. And I feel like it's like, I rarely hear them, this isn't a diss on you guys, that they're working in tandem with a proactive incentive to create long-term housing. And I think particularly in our community, that somewhat visible, invisible issue of like BARD, which is a, you know, symbiotic and fraught relationship, particularly around housing. Like, there's 450 grad students that don't get housing on campus. I'm deeply involved with trying to solve that problem. So, you know, there is sometimes I think we have to have or at least play around with a hyper bespoke approach to the pressures on this community, because I know umpteen landlords that rent to students. I mean, we all do, right? And that is also, I mean, we all know them, not we all do it. There's a need for that, right? There's BARD faculty that rent to BARD students. That is a part of the economic strata of our community. But at the same time, and I think actually in some ways that BARD students who need housing are also almost as targetable a renter community as like STR people. Like there are landlords that treat that as like a no-brainer, and there are some who don't address that in a community-minded way. A lot of them don't live here, a lot of them. So they also get to do, 12-month leases with students who only need 9 and then freak out for 3 months. So I just also wonder if there's like a point in at least imagining like restrictions that include solving those kinds of problems. Like if there's a lottery on student housing, or like those houses get to Airbnb in the summer only, then you have suddenly like students who can get a 9-month lease, people who get Airbnb in the summer, and a cap on that so that some of these other houses that can't be just rented out as STRs could actually be like proactively set up to be long-term rental, because that's also a really big issue about who can rent long-term, who's not going to kind of be sidelined for the flexibility that student housing might allow. Also, I like tree houses and think you should be able to rent them. Just because they're not long-term housing for most.
And, it's true that in about 2014-15, there were 280 students renting in this village. And it's currently about 120. And that student population, the biggest factor, apart from the fact that we've been busting our ass to take care of Tivoli for 10 years and make it a nice, respectable place with self-esteem, the pandemic and the surge in housing demand up here, and many, by my count, it's about 14 or 16 houses which have been student rentals in this village for the last 15 to 20 years were bought, and they're owner occupied now. Just to paint, see the trend that we've been in. So that means there's a lot less rentals for anybody. Yes. Hayden?
I want to take that back to the B&Bs thing, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I am strongly against the 1 and 2 bedroom option. I have little sympathy for current operators. I'm thinking of 2 particular cases nearly across one another. And in fact, I know that Wynn's currently is actually being used for long-term lodging. It's not being Airbnb, so it's not impacting their business model. I think that, and this is part of the write-up that we all put together, that not simply not allowing that means that they can choose to operate as a short-term rental if they find that is working out for them, which hopefully it won't. Because then there's a strong incentive to turn that into long-term housing. I also want to kick out there, back into long-term, smaller long-term housing than it used to be. But I also want to kick out there, while we're talking about affordability, there are vacant properties in this village. There's at least a couple of them that I can think of, some of them with substantial capacity. I think that a vacancy tax, which is something that is increasingly being implemented in various communities around the country, and in Canada as well, is something that we should consider to try to push housing supply back out there, where right now, it's not available because somebody just wants to sit on it. I don't know, take a worker housing tax write-off, that sort of thing. I think that should be something that we consider as part of the overall program.
Ask for my own clarification. The objection to a 1 or 2 bedroom bed and breakfast is that it could be a long-term rental.
It could be a long-term rental.
That would be also true of the 3 and 4 bedroom.
Yes, but nobody lives in the 1 or 2. Right. And the 3 or 4, somebody lives there, right? You have, and like the 1 or 2 can be unhosted is the point. So I don't per se object to a 1 or 2 bedroom bed and breakfast. That's fine. It's the lack of somebody who actually lives there. And
so it's as much the hosting that's a concern of yours as the fact that it could also be a long-term.
Yeah, I would like to see, ideally you can have capacity for long-term rentals, that's great. But if you have a, you know, a 3 or 4 bedroom house that does not really cleanly divide into 3 or 4 long-term rentals, then that's not gonna happen anyway. So you might as well have a permanent fixture of the community and the people who live there, and have additional lodging capacity, as we've talked about needing. It's where you lose that hosted element, then you no longer have a permanent fixture in the community. It's not hosted, so it's just a small apartment that could be somebody living there, but isn't.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment on the ADUs and the lot sizes. So I grew up in Montgomery Street in a large yard, right next to Emily, who has a very small yard. I bought a house in the development with a very small yard. I've always thought that why can't we build something on our large property we have a big family, if whoever knows us, that like we could live, one of us could live in. You know, there's just a lot of land that goes unused. So having the ADUs be able to be, it's great for us and we have the property size there. Because if we put something there, it won't, depending on where you put it, negatively affect Emily or Dr. Seeger or something like that, or the aesthetics of Montgomery Street. If I put an ADU on my property, on Memorial, on the corner, it's going to look ridiculous. And it's going to, if my next door neighbor put it on there, I would be a little annoyed, I guess, like depending on, because you don't want it to become an overabundance of buildings, because then it looks like it's clustered, it's now we have too many people, too many buildings in a small area, and just aesthetically it doesn't look good. As much as you want to like dress it up to look like the house that's on the property, you now have this building, whether it's new construction. Adding on is, you know, it's a little different because you can add on and still have that space, but to have a new building, like whether it's a shed, a barn, or something put in, we all know there's tiny houses, like you need to have the space for it to look right, like so that it doesn't look, I don't know, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but like I agree with needing more space and not being able to have everybody be able to build or put an ADU on their property. That was the one part. The other thing is, like, I wanted to just touch back, he had mentioned originally the specific wording of the single-family home versus the, you know, other word, like what is how does it affect those other buildings that are not the one?
Right, so you got single-family homes, multi-family homes,
yeah,
two-family homes. Are there any others, Dan? I think that's it, right?
I'm sure there are, but that's a great.
Yeah, it's a good start. So like our current existing bed and breakfast code says single-family homes, owner occupied, which means you couldn't have a bed and breakfast in a duplex or a multifamily home.
So if somebody has a multifamily home for the STR, it's not allowed.
We're proposing in this first go to say you can't do that.
Okay, so this is just only is,
Where
okay.
Stacy used to live, duplex, right? So
Two separate, yes,
you're renting in there.
multi-unit.
Does Tivoli want to let an STR operate in that situation or not? You know?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it was
Sure.
only
Yeah.
for that.
Good question. Masha.
On ADUs, I haven't talked about it yet, so I'm not just gonna reiterate things.
Mhm.
It seems like to me, it seems that the legislation on ADUs, currently, the proposed legislation is too restrictive in terms of lot size. I also don't think that it should be, anybody in whatever size of yard should be able to build anything. Obviously, I think it should be reasonable, it should be not encumbering their neighbors too much so that you're suddenly looking out of your window into somebody else's bathroom. Obviously, that wouldn't be good. I do agree with Dan, though, and other people that spoke about how it really requires such a humongous lot size at the moment, and I don't think that's necessary. I think there was a 250 square feet minimum for an accessory dwelling unit proposed in legislation. There are beautiful tiny homes that are 150 square feet. I know it might sound
You know,
funny.
currently in Tivoli, the minimum is 500. So we're actually
Wow.
we're going in the right direction. at least.
That's great, that's great. I'm just bringing it up. I'm not saying it has to be 150 square feet, but I'm just saying, like, if we're concerned about the lot size, we might want to make sure that if people want to build or order and just, you know, have it delivered for a 150 square foot little home, that might be better for their neighbors as well, because it's not going to be butting into the property lines, etc. Yeah, so I think that would be great. I think when we spoke about this in our little group, Jonathan, who's in the zoning board, we were talking about how much it would make the people who, you know, work in the village or volunteer for the village go and review everything and get these special permits, et cetera, et cetera. I think it should be as of right, if your property meets the requirements, and if you are, you know, you should just be able to build one, I think. Obviously, there's so many, I don't know as much about the village.
I mean, one
Sure.
other thing to consider about the ADUs is lot coverage, right? Like, we all see what Tivoli looks like when it rains, right? So the more
Right.
non-permeable surface that we're adding means bigger lakes.
Right, right. So impermeable surface, like minimum or maximum, should be enforced.
Right, like lot coverage, percentages,
Right.
that kind of thing.
What could help with that, right, would be not requiring an additional parking spot, for
Right, or
example.
having it have to, or, you know.
There's municipal lot, there's people who live in the same family use the same car. It's a discussion that can happen with the village. I don't think that everybody should just like build an ADU and pile up their cars on the road. I also park on the street, so it's not
Do
for
what we
me.
do very carefully and sort of strategically, just because
Truly.
it's
Yeah.
such a small village, right? And we have such a small sort of area, right? That even the smallest butterfly flapping its wings, like, does have an effect, right? So.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah.
Mark,
Real quick, I think the minutia that's going on here is like very slight. It seems we're almost all in the same ballpark here. I think so. All trying to accomplish the same thing, slightly. What I was
think I
wondering.
actually agree with you, Mark. As much as, you know, we just, you know, the weeds are.
Well, there was one person they disagreed with, but that's okay.
You disagree with me?
Yeah, why not?
Oh. You're in California, you know what the desolation looks like.
I'll take issue with that.
I will. There was a point that was brought up about infrastructure, and it is kind of important. I mean, it was good, and you brought it up too. It looks like you're thinking about it. If we have 100 more people living on a street, going down a street that weren't there before, it's going to chew up the roads. Somebody who doesn't have the ability to capitalize on their home that they own to get more income from it, is their property taxes for Tivoli going to go up to fill that pothole? So therefore, they're subsidizing the person who has the ability to rent out something there. I don't know how the economic works, but I am curious if the board looked at best case scenario, what would the population increase be here if everyone got their way? Are we looking at 200, 300, 500 people living here a day? More than we have now?
I'll speak for myself. I don't think about this in terms of population, and I haven't run the numbers. So you mean like if everyone got to put an ADU in?
Yeah, who wants one?
Under our restricted stuff?
Yeah.
I haven't run those numbers.
So we really don't know what the impact would be on the village.
Might be good for me to go back and do that, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think about this in terms of how much I hear there's not enough housing, especially renting. I mean, I hear that about buying as well, but also how do people, like, I can't afford the house that I grew up in here, you know? Like, how do we let people stick around here? Whether you've been here 50 years or 2 years, you know? Because all our costs are going up. And it's great we have new water and we're getting a new sewer plant, but it's going to be a cost.
I just don't think, I mean, with everything that's going on, I don't think the population here would increase more than 200, 300 a year.
best case.
And that's really like, because we built out all the ADUs currently allowed under the law?
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Hasn't the population of the village gone down in like the last 100 years?
The high point is 1900.
Right.
It was about 1,300 people. That
Right,
was the-
and it's now, so it's about 200.
It was 750, 800 in the
80s.
late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And now, then we were at 1,118 in 2010 census and 1,012 in the 2020 census.
So in
But we have to take
1900, the village was
2020
able to
years.
hold 1,300 people.
Mhm.
And if you're projecting a 200-person increase, that'd bring us right back to 1900.
I don't know what the increase would be. It'd be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be hard to find out.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if we have the lot sizes and the ADUs and whatever, you should be able to figure it out. Maybe.
Well, what I hear, for me, that's been useful is, you know, we want to preserve our community, right? And we can start with real general stuff we can all agree on. But I think these, you know, the details about, is it 1 or 2 bedrooms? You know, do we need to run the projections if we tinker with the setbacks and whatnot? I mean, we're not trying to write a law promoting ADUs where you really can't build any. That's not the goal. But we want to be smart, and we, you know, it's like, we're always thinking about the neighbor too, and how does that affect the person who's not doing an SDR and not doing the ADU, and their feelings about their community as well. Other comments or questions? Hayden?
Can I just pick something concrete out there about the ADU? Because one thing I think, we're all talking about like new construction, we're talking about if you're putting a new building on, but frankly, something that we know that we need to do, both as a community and in general, is convert more currently 2 large single-family homes into multifamily dwellings, and that appears to be provided for under this ADU law. I would just, you know, so it's like section, what is it? Oh God, it's look, the letter is L. There's only a few of those, and so it's saying, you know, it's greater than, not less than 50% greater than the minimum lot area specified in the district schedule, variable regulations for a one-family dwelling, and that's if you're doing new construction or expansion of the primary structure. I think that it would make sense because there's going to be situations where you want to cut something up and turn it into 2, and you know, my mom, when she had worked on her house like 20 years ago, planned for this somehow because she's like a total weirdo. But most people don't do that, and so you might say, oh shoot, we really need to put a new entryway here. And that's going to constitute an expansion of the existing structure, but percentage-wise, it's like nothing, right? And so under this regulation, you wouldn't be able to do that. You wouldn't be able to divide if you don't have a substantially larger lot than the minimum requirement. Even if you're only talking about putting on, you know, what, 50, 100 square feet, maybe, that could take something from being uncomfortable, like really 1.5 dwellings worth of space, up to 2. And I just think that's a spot where, without having to completely revisit the whole thing, there's room to make it more flexible and say, well, if you're putting on less than a 20% expansion of your existing footprint, then maybe we don't have to be quite as restrictive as if you're putting in an entire new building somewhere else. Or if you're putting on, like, you're greatly expanding the size of your existing building.
I agree.
I would love to go back to the bed and breakfast thing, because there are other communities who said, you know what, scrap that, that's an antiquated term, not useful, let's call everything an STR,
Yeah.
and then design from there, so.
I'm fine with that with the 2 grandfathered in.
I think me too.
I like
But, so part of why we were hanging on to that though is that, I'll speak for myself, I want to be very restrictive on the STRs. I want them to be for people who are here and need to stay here and not have speculators buy up the village. That is where I'm coming from. But So that's why it's starting with one bedroom. What if it's one or two? There are big buildings that could be 3 or 4 bedroom STRs if we let go of B&B, right? So if we say we can have STRs, then we're gonna make a split. They're both called STRs, but one is 1 and 2 and one is 3 and 4. See, I just like having a different label.
I'm not sure why the 1, 2, 3, and 4, what's the purpose of dividing B&Bs up by size, as opposed to by restrictions put upon them, and owner occupied?
Working in that we started doing that split when we'd already limited it to the business districts. And then that started to make sense because we have some single-family homes there, but we also have retail spaces with dwelling space upstairs, so that's where that came from.
Yeah.
So no bed and breakfast anywhere.
Wait.
It's connected, right, because, I mean, I would say that, I mean, I think we've got a little memo that I'll give you to kind of summarize the thoughts on this, but I think that the thinking was that you couldn't really get rid of the B&B thing if
I'm sorry, could or could not?
You could, but in my mind, you know, you know, I think everything I've said has been said already.
I'm
So
just-
is there any scenario where someone could do some short-term renting more than 90 days a year?
Yeah.
Exactly, that's what I
Are we
don't-
willing to let go of that or not?
I think no, but that needs to be subject to, you know, greater restrictions, and so not unhosted and complying, you know. I think primary residence or owner occupied would be ideal, because that way you prevent the buy up 7 homes thing, right? If you can find a way to say, and I know that there's the whole thing with the court case, but the last time that we talked about this a long time ago, so maybe that court case has now had more repercussions. The conclusion was, well, it's going to take a while for it to actually have an impact here, so you might as well try. And I
We don't have the resources to fight
Right.
it.
But if you could say owner occupied in a bed and breakfast scenario, then you prevent the entire neighborhood bought up by one person, and it requires that the person is there, being a part of the community, and also offering lodging. And I think that that's fine, and that is a meaningfully separate category from an STR, where you do, if you are allowing some quantity of unposted stay in an STR.
I don't think there's any appetite on this board for unhosted anything.
But
If that's-
isn't the 1 to 2 bedroom B&B
Yeah, other than that.
rule
Other than
allowed
that.
to be unhosted?
That's
Other than that.
That's very
Yeah,
substantial.
so that's
Especially
very
in the
problematic.
business district, right? So if it's,
So it is only single family.
if you're doing it as a business, right? Like, if you're doing more than 90 days a year, or even 40 days a year, right? Like, it's your business, right? Like, it's something that, like, it's legit, you pay taxes on it, it's a business, right? So it seemed to make more sense in the business district than, because if you have a B&B, if I have a B&B on Montgomery Street, right? And so I have people in and out every day of the year, which I could, right, with a B&B. Like, that's really a business, right? Like, that's more intensive than a home occupation. Like, if I did massage therapy, God forbid, right? Like, you know, I mean, that would have like very limited traffic, limited impact on you guys, right? Like, whereas if I'm running a B&B, like, I could do it all the time. So,
But I guess what comes down to me is taking housing stock away from the people we want to take housing, we don't want to take housing stock away from.
right. I'm fine with no B&Bs, no STRs, so.
But I think that taking the, sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Something that, for me, when we had this discussion, it came about, we took the B&B out and we put it back in and we went back and forth. But I think the idea that it could be a business and as viewed by, first of all, how many people are going to do that? And how many properties are eligible for that? But it wasn't taking it off the table to have some form of unhosted for somebody that wants a business, just like if I wanted to put a massage studio We can be partners. But that's something I'm gonna pay someone to clean it. I'm going to have a handyman. I'm gonna have somebody who's gonna watch it, and it's a business of mine.
But now we're basically putting an Airbnb, permanent Airbnb downtown for several, or 10, or 15. And I don't think that's what we all want, right?
Yes.
I feel like the concern is the houses that are not businesses being turned into a business and losing that housing. So
Yes.
like, we know there's Wynn's, we know there's that other thing across the street from that, that have the business downstairs, and then they bought the one guy was here last time, he said he purposely bought the house because he could have the business and rent the upstairs, and that it would tank him if this happened, that he wasn't allowed to have it. So, but the house next to them is residential. They don't want no business. It's in between businesses. So now somebody comes in, buys that house to just turn it into a business, then turns the upstairs into the rental. That's, I think, where the concern comes. Or somebody goes to your apartment and says, I want to put a business in here. I'm gonna offer this person this amount of money. I'm gonna turn the business downstairs. Upstairs will be the bed and breakfast. You get out, you don't find your own time. So in that business district, there's a lot of, it's business district, but there's houses. I mean, the one house.
Basically residential.
Right, the one house just got sold and redone, and it's the architecture and another thing. That was a house. It's now off the market as a house, and it's a business. I don't like seeing that. It drives me nuts.
But the zoning is designed for that.
I know it is. I know it, yeah, I know it is. So I think that's the concern.
It's for
This is
We're
further
just gonna run this a
incentive.
little bit, because we're still going, this is great. Linda, you've been waiting?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I very much agree with Emily, that if it's going to be, I don't care if it's hosted or non-hosted, if it's 4 rooms being rented out, it's crucial to me that it be in the business district. If it ends up next to me, that's it, we're selling. I mean, it's a big deal that if you're going to have these big bed and breakfasts or whatever with multiple rooms and multiple guests coming, to me they're just other versions of hotels, that they be businesses and they be in the business district.
But the other side is that there are people like you that live in the business district that just are zoned business, the business district. So like the Clevelands, they have a residence in the middle of the business district.
Right.
So next to them comes a bed and breakfast. It'd be like may feel the same. I'm moving, So like I think that's where can you put like other restrictions in that bed? If you were going to allow the bed and breakfast, they'd have to be like I don't know.
Fine-tune it to keep the residents safe.
Right, so that those can't be then turned into the bed and breakfast. Like, if you're gonna do a bed and breakfast, whatever's is there. But then you can't turn a new building into that. It either is the rental, or you buy the home, or it turns into a full business. You can't.
Also, there's, Pine Street's adjacent to the business district. We already see so much traffic on our street so bringing, restricting it to the business district doesn't seem like the framing I want to get at to address this issue. Because I think it could bring a lot of more traffic, more people, stuff. But
Dan?
Just a quick point. You said a couple times, we're getting really close, and is the STR, is it 1 bedroom or 2? And we'll think about that. But I just want to remind you heard a lot of people say you should allow unhosted rentals. I think the majority of people who spoke on this issue said there's nothing wrong with Jim going away and doing an unhosted rental of his house for 2 weeks. So I just want to, you said there's no appetite for it. I respect that, but that's not what you're hearing from this audience. You're hearing some voices that say, don't let people do unhosted.
I think that where the hosting concern comes for me is if someone has to live there, whether it's the owner or the live-in agent, that's a way to reduce the speculators buying up stuff. That's where that's coming from.
Yes.
I'm not coming at it from like, you can't go on vacation and put
No,
someone in
I
your
know.
house.
The good thing is, I think we all agree, like, what we don't want. We don't want the speculation. That word has come up again and again.
Yeah.
Like, we all want to avoid that. I just think it's
So-
just really
so how do you do
about.
that then? Because
I think that the 60-day thing or the 40-day thing, however many it is, you know, combined with all your other very sensible rules on requiring a permit, limiting it to one person, I mean, those rules are all good. And I think would get us the result we want. It would allow Jim to rent out his house for 2 weeks, and a family comes in and they discover Tivoli, and this is
Yeah.
wonderful, and they
Okay.
support the businesses. Wonderful, you know? So I
Thanks.
just want to flag that.
Masha's been waiting, and then Tom.
There's a desire here, a lot of desire to protect the feelings and comfort and the quiet and whatever of current homeowners, I'm hearing, on Montgomery, on North, Woods, et cetera, on all these streets. I just want to reiterate that to me is different from, like, it's a bed and breakfast starts next to your house. You're still not being pushed out of your house. It may be super inconvenient and it may be loud and you might not be super enjoying living in your house, but you still own your house. We don't have a lot of apartments in Tivoli at all. Most of the people that I'm friends with who are basically my found family, because none of my family is in the United States, are all renting apartments in the business district. I understand that the first floor of the business district is reserved for businesses. That is fine. An entire home that is a single, like one-story home in the business district, like the one next to where I live, as a business, I think it's fine. The homes that have apartments, or that could have apartments, or that had apartments on the second story with a business below them, I feel very strongly that those apartments have to be long-term rentals. Or one of those apartments has to be, or one of those rooms has to be occupied by the building owner, property owner, and they are there, and they're part of the community, and they can sometimes host and cook breakfast for the people that they host, etc. If the rules as written go into place, 4 different buildings that I know of, or 3 different buildings, would lose several apartments, and I know every single person who lives there, who cannot, probably even combined, rent a house together, period. Not to say that there are any houses for rent that would be available for 4 people right now in this village, other than the black one next to Treasury. That's it.
Tom?
You know, I've talked about this before, about how all these places come in, they buy up, they're running businesses, whether they're short-term rentals, long-term rentals, or large student rentals, whatever. Those people, and I know people don't want to hear this, but those people are paying the same taxes on that property that I pay on my property, and they got a business going. I've always said there should be some kind of a business tax. If you're gonna do something like this, these properties should be taxed as a business, not as a residential tax that I pay or you pay. They're making money. I don't care how you cut the pie, they're making dollars. So they should be paying another tax. Again, it's a burden on the infrastructure. You know, we all know it costs to operate police, water, sewer, everything. But again, if you're making money, then you need to contribute back to what do you call it? I mean,
They are paying taxes. You pay in Dutchess County 4%, and if you have a B&B, it's 11%. They're paying a lot of taxes to have that business.
they're not paying anything to the village of Tivoli.
That's true.
That's the bottom line. I mean, it costs us as the taxpayers.
That's actually also something that, we've talked about. Is there a possibility to levy a local lodging tax in any of these short-term rental B&B scenarios?
Isn't that the hotel tax?
I think Hudson did that. Hudson has one. I think it's worked pretty well.
That's a
hotel
county
tax.
level.
But at the village
But
level.
at a village level lodging tax.
I think that's a great idea.
Oh,
Because that, it's like you say, like if people are making money off of this substantially, and also, I mean, I think that it's a good point. If we're gonna say you can't have B&Bs outside of the district, the GB, right, then, well, do we consider existing rental properties? You know, they're not businesses in the same sense, but people are making money off of them, so is that a double standard at that point to say, you can't have a B&B outside of the GB on the basis of it's a business that makes money, but you can have a rental unit that makes money?
Yeah, that's not the basis, it's more like how frequently is the turnover, is it long-term or is it short-term?
Sure, yeah, but I mean, that was the justification that we were just hearing was, you know, it's a one is a business, but
I think
one must
that
not be.
might serve to actually drive up the rental price, right? Like if you're taxing long-term rentals.
I'm not actually suggesting taxing long-term rentals necessarily. I'm saying that if you take that logic and you say, well, this is something that's making money, then can you still say on that basis? And if you're saying it's just a higher turnover rate and whatever, and that's the big issue. But then I'm just saying that it doesn't make sense to fully exclude B&Bs from areas outside of the GB on the basis of you can't have a money-making structure out there because we already have them. Yeah.
Naveen?
So I'm going back to just the STR issue, right? On one hand, there seems to be this sentiment that people who want to have STRs here want to make a lot of money, but we have all these restrictions written in here that said you might be restricted only 40 days, 60 days, whatever. Okay? You could perhaps rent it out for 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks in a year if you're taking a vacation. I'm not sure that under the rules you're considering, anybody is making a boatload of money. It's really, in some ways, what people say, it allows me to live in this village and pay my taxes.
Yeah.
So I think that should be considered as well. It's not a money-making mechanism for a lot of people. It really is sustenance for them.
Yeah, I think
That's why
we're
it's
trying to go to allow that and prevent the possible
That's
dangers.
fine.
So,
Yeah.
you know, finding that line is
I
what
think
we're trying to
that
do
there's-
together.
Sorry, there's a
Yes.
difference when you're talking about someone's primary residence and then renting that out, as opposed to they have a primary residence and then they own other properties. And then those other properties they're renting out, and you're saying they're not making money on them. Well, that's, that's a bad, I don't know, maybe how they're running their business then, but they're renting out additional properties other than the home they live in. So to me, there's a big difference if you're talking about someone's primary residence or if they have additional properties that they own and they're renting those out. People rent them out, long-term rentals, which is great, but if we're talking about short-term rentals, they're running lodging establishments in those places. They don't live there, that's supplementing their income because it's adding to their revenue, but it's not, giving them more money so they can stay in their homes. It's a business, it's a different enterprise.
Yes.
I think there's a distinction.
Rules prevent that?
Well,
Not the
yeah.
B&B
Not the
loophole.
B&B.
The
Not the
B&B
B&B.
loophole would
So
allow them.
I guess we're kind of coming around to we can grab the B&Bs.
Yeah.
I'm kind of talking myself into
Yeah, right, it's like.
I'm just scrapping them if you allow for unhosted rentals. That's my
Say that
position.
again one more time.
I'm for scrapping B&Bs completely if you allow for unhosted rentals.
And what about numbers of rooms?
Oh, get rid of that for
Any
sure.
number as long as you're there to make breakfast. I think that's a legitimate definition,
Well,
like,
this is slightly different from what
is
you're
the-
proposing.
Yeah, I mean, the bed and breakfast actually is codified in the state building code, and it looks very much like what we're calling STR here. So it's owner-occupied, single-family dwelling, and I think, really for kind of the outer territories of the village, makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of already happening, people are already doing this. And it's a nice, the way it works, I mean, I know locally to my house, we have one, and it works nicely because it's available as kind of a B&B model, but then also if there is a long-term need, a student needs a place for a semester or whatever, it fills that beautifully, and it's just a house that has some extra bedrooms. So it comes back to this issue of vacancy, so it really accelerates vacancy. I think, on this issue of people being able to rent out their house for a short amount of time, could there be like a separate thing that just stipulates residents can rent out their house for up to 2 weeks or 4
We're gonna do
weeks.
it. I've tried not to do it. Town of Red Hook has something that we think is a little too wonky and tricky to enforce, and I'm skeptical, but they have that. And we looked at it. And we talked about it. So the people that left didn't get their receipt. So they have what, I don't know, Chris Shaw likes to call it the 2-week freebie. So, Jim.
Who has no plans to do this, but would like to be allowed
Red Hook town law, if Jim goes on vacation, anyone anywhere in the township of Red Hook can go away for 2 weeks and they get like a free STR. They still have to sign up and do a license and stuff, but, so they get a.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So that's
the reality is that it's probably, it's a kind of a pain in the ass to administer that, because everybody in the village. The other side of that is if it's not there, people are just gonna do it anyway, probably.
Also true.
And then it's a pain in the ass to enforce, So one of the things just to tack on with the ADUs, I mean, people have alluded to this, but to the extent that there is like a vision that you all have, it would be great to see that or hear about it, and that not necessarily tonight or just, I'm not sure what's coming down the road with all this, but it'd be great to know just what are the assumptions you're making, what are the decisions you're making on the detail level, lot by lot, to shape that, because I think it is really all about the details.
Yeah, just throwing that real quick. When you see me tomorrow driving around with my legalized ADU bumper sticker on my car, know that I think I'm not an anarchist. I think there's rules. I totally understand that you got to have regulations and bulk regulations. And so I wonder if there's an opportunity to do, not to make you all do more work, and so grateful for all the work that you already did, but a bulk analysis, right? That's the kind of standard thing you might do. This guy's an architect, probably do it, right? And look at just play around with like different configurations of where you could put an ADU in, say, a 15,000 square foot lot, let's say, as opposed to an acre one. I think that would be good, and I think, like I said, there's a lot, we're not alone. There are a lot of places out there who are doing this and are thinking about how to manage privacy concerns while also allowing people to have these structures, which we've all talked about the benefits. So just a thought that it could be a good next step.
Kathy, you've been quiet tonight. You can always count on you to say something. I'm just recognizing that.
My question is, do you have a timetable on when you hope to resolve this
We'll be
issue?
back in 14 months. Timetable, I mean, well, we have a lot to chew on. I feel very, I wanted to get this done before tonight. I mean, I
He
felt-
wanted it done 14 months ago. I will tell you that. He was ready to be like, put a stamp on it. But the rest of us-
But we want to get it right also. And,
And
we
really
already
think
slowed
about
down a
it.
year to bring ADUs into the mix. And, I think there's probably lots of value in what you suggest, Dan, but now I'm like, are we gonna also do a bulk reg analysis into the mix? And how much will that slow it down? Maybe, I don't know. Whatever we're passing when we get to that point, was gonna have a 6-month period before it kicks in, so that people who've been operating things that they shouldn't be have time to make adjustments to the new normal. But, I don't know, can we do this in a couple months, maybe?
Could you batch it out, do STRs first, and then or do you want to do it all together?
Trying to keep everyone's taxes low. And every time we do a law, it costs about $5,000. So that's why we've got an omnibus with 3 cars in it here tonight. So
Okay.
that's the thing. I'm not getting those phone calls quite as frequently as I did in 2022, but so.
But then there was that guy at that meeting who was like, I own a house and I don't live here and I am just Airbnb-ing it. And,
Yeah, he sent me a thing this big at about 6:15 tonight, so we'll get to read that too.
If we were to have all the people that haven't been paying for running STRs paid back, then we could probably fund a lot, I'm just saying. That's all.
Then we can do subsidized housing.
When you say, when this issue, when we pass a law, does that mean an agreement between the 5 trustees, or is there a community vote?
There's never a community vote. We live in a representative, not a direct democracy. You elect representatives every 2 years, and then we have the 5 votes. However, we do try and do this kind of stuff a lot.
Will you do a second iteration of the proposal that then can be thought about before
So-
it goes to lawmaking?
Possibly, probably.
That seems reasonable.
We do have to keep this particular effort in balance with the many other things that are facing the village and this board, so it can't just be this internal thing. But either we'll have another one of these, but I hope we don't need to because we'll come up with something. There's 2 processes. I don't want to commit to that yet, but I'm hearing you say it. It's just, we've all been here for over 2 hours, and maybe I'm getting tired. But anytime, if we could go from here, have another stab at it, make our tweaks, and then any law that we would pass, there's a public hearing, and everyone can come. Right now, we couldn't go past something because we haven't had a public hearing. So we like to do these fora because it shakes out an awful lot of stuff. And the public hearings, like you gotta notice it in the paper, and it does cost a couple $100. And so, we try to do these fora first. But, we don't have interest in doing something that you all don't know about. So maybe if we agree the next one will be an hour. We'll see.
Or written comments only or something.
Yeah, I mean, we will search, I don't know when we're gonna get a draft, but we'll get another draft. And we're probably gonna, I'm sure many of us will have follow-up conversations about various things you've raised. We got, not a lot, but a few written comments, and those are from the people that want different things than the people who came to want. But they are property owners and taxpayers and all that stuff, and citizens just like everybody else. So we'll come back and we'll circulate that, and we can keep talking. Yes, Masha?
For the 6 people that are here who are not part of Tivoli Tomorrow and the board, there is a website that he put together called tivolitomorrow.org, and you can actually go on there and read the comments that we wrote like a letter, so it's easier because everybody was just talking about a lot of stuff, but there's just kind of like an ABC list of addressing different parts of this proposal. If
We
you're
probably need
interested,
to revise that.
we will definitely also revise it.
We might revise our B&B point, but basically it's a summary of several discussions that were had by concerned citizens, so.
Comments? I mean, these meetings, well, I'm complaining about being tired, I really do. They're valuable, they're hugely valuable, I really love them, and I love that so many people come and participate. But written things are also great. You can reread them and reread them, so do both.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna give Kathy the last one.
I want to mention that Panda has a new cable channel called Panda Now. And if you get that on your, I put it on my Roku device, you can see all their, archived videos. And so this will probably be up in 2 days, and you can review what we said in these 2
Yes.
hours.
I do go back and watch Panda videos.
Panda Now.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, everyone.